One thing is pretty clear about Bernie Sanders' campaign. His supporters are certainly unwavering. Since his first presidential campaign, he has mounted a large online following, often dubbed the Bernie Bros.
So in addition to attacks on Sanders, hit pieces have been taken aimed at those supporters. Here to discuss the attacks Sanders' influence has had on his campaign is Anya Parampil. She's host and a contributor for Gray Zone. Great to see you, Anya. How are you?
Good to be with
Welcome.
you guys.
We're glad to have you on.
So,
Thanks for inviting me.
Crystal and I both, we saw you on Tucker Carlson's show. I personally really enjoyed your segment. And I think let's start off with that, which is that the treatment of Bernie, I mean, I think the reason Tucker had you on, the reason I think resonate with some people on this show is because I see the same strand of smearing against anti-establishment people. Maybe explain it a little bit for the viewers.
Well, something I mentioned in my segment with Tucker Carlson was that there was a strategy implemented against Jeremy Corbyn, the progressive leader of the UK's Labour Party. He won, they have more of a democratic system when it comes to electing their party leaders, so he was actually able to take control of the Labour Party. And then you saw for years, even though there was a pretty much failure within the Conservative Party, for delivering on things like Brexit, an attack, a concerted attack against Corbyn. They constantly labeled him as an anti-Semite, tried to get him to throw some of his more progressive members of the party, like Chris Williamson, an actual member of parliament who had to resign and was kicked out of the party as a result of these attacks. And that's because he didn't stand by people like Williamson, even though these are supposed to be his best friend. So when you apply that to the Sanders strategy, it's clear the Democrats here, the liberal, neoliberal corporate establishment is doing the same thing, whether it was Cenk Uygur or now Joe Rogan, or before that, Zephyr Teachout. In between, they are going to try and get him to throw away his progressive surrogates and also his more controversial and popular surrogates. Anybody who wants Sanders to win would understand why it's useful for him to include an endorsement from Joe Rogan. Right. Probably one of the most recognizable U.S. cultural figures in the world. Right. And then you have this segment on Twitter asking him to denounce Rogan or remove his endorsement from that altogether.
Well, and it's all very hypocritical and very selectively applied, right? They're happy to embrace these like neocons, unreformed neocons.
Right. John Bolton is now the hero.
Right, exactly. I mean, it just says it all, right? Or John Brennan, I mean, these people who justified torture, who lied us into war, they're resistance heroes, but Joe Rogan is out of bounds. I think it's obvious to me how it's being weaponized selectively to try to discredit Sanders and his movement by extension.
There's no doubt about it that that's what they're trying to do. And the sad thing is that it worked with Sanders the first two times. He distanced himself from Cenk. Right. He also denounced Zephyr Teachout's op-ed on Joe Biden, even though nothing was factually incorrect. So what did you have to apologize for? The good thing is he's not bent on Rogan so far. And I think that as we get closer to Iowa, and especially once he starts winning, there's going to be an uptick in these attacks. I guarantee you now. We just published a piece at the Gray Zone by my colleague Max Blumenthal and Alex Rubinstein, where they went down the foreign policy advisors to Elizabeth Warren, and it's a very ugly list. Think tankers, the DC blob Standard in a nutshell, and a lot of pro-Israel former lobbyists and current lobbyists. And I guarantee you there will be an effort to attack Sanders, mark my words, as anti-Semitic and get him to denounce specifically Ilhan Omar, because she is one of his, she's the squad. She has this image as one of the most progressive members of Congress. She's a surrogate for him, and they've already started to do this in the media. I will say, what I found bizarre was that he's willing to denounce Cenk. Right, a guy who's probably raised millions of dollars for him just through the creation of and
Young
is running
Turks.
for office.
And running for office, but like Linda Sarsour, who is far more problematic for him from a public perspective. I mean, I know your perspective, you shouldn't denounce anybody, but I'm saying, like, if you're going to denounce somebody, like, one was going to cause you political problems, the other is to a bunch of woke people on Twitter. As somebody on the progressive left, how do you view that that kind of, I mean, this is a consistency now with Jeremy Corbyn and with Sanders, is that there seems to be this bowing to like the woke progressive left and letting them police your own movement. And from my perspective, that's part of why I want to stay as far away from it as I can, because I see legitimate economic concern, but I see people who are willing to bow to the worst actors in our politics.
I think that's one of the most toxic elements within the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, or just progressive politics in general. It's very alienating, I think, for average people sitting at home to constantly have this focus on identity politics rather than a class-based analysis of the issues in society. And when we think about Sanders specifically, he has this record of working and representing the people who go to work every day, don't just rely on income from their families or from stock portfolios, and that gets lost when he's forced to make comments about Joe Rogan's one tweet that he made about people fighting in the MMA, trans women fighting in the MMA. It's absolutely ridiculous. More people are going to relate to Joe Rogan and not even on the issue, the trans issue, just on his way of questioning the world, than a small group on Twitter. I think people like us in the media, we are focused on Twitter, and sometimes it feels like those people are the majority, the people that are just harping on these identity issues. But fortunately, I don't think that's the entire country.
Right. Well, we saw it with the Elizabeth Warren attack on him, trying to frame him as sexist. I mean, completely backfired. People saw right through it, and also I think people felt like, why should I care what happened in a private conversation over a year ago?
And do we trust her? I mean, this is someone who really has demonstrated herself to be a pathological liar.
You don't want to get in a credibility debate with Bernie Sanders, no matter who you are, whether you have credibility issues of your own or not. I mean, people feel very strongly about that. I wanted to ask you, do you think that I totally agree with you, the anti-Semitic attack is coming. It's already being rolled out. Is it hard for that to stick, though, with him, given the fact that he is himself Jewish?
Well, this is something that the Israel lobby loves, actually. We've seen plenty of progressive Jews attacked for their stance, just saying that Palestinians deserve rights. We know that at the Gray Zone very well, because my colleague Max Blumenthal, he's constantly attacked as a self-hating Jew. I mean, that's what they say. They're not afraid to put out these really ugly insults, but it won't stick. Because even in this day and age, among progressive Jews, it's pretty acceptable to criticize Israel, especially when you have Netanyahu in D.C. right now meeting with President Trump. And Trump and Netanyahu have kind of taken the mask off the special relationship with Israel, from Trump recognizing the capital in Jerusalem to now it seems they're going to allow Israel to annex the West Bank and make this system of apartheid official. That's really what the deal of the century will be. So I don't think it will stick, because in this country, people are tired of those kinds of attacks, and also they see through it, because the policies and the news speaks for itself. I mean, we've seen over the past over a year the Great March of Return taking place on the border fence between Gaza and Israel, and Israeli snipers shooting unarmed Palestinians and
I don't want to litigate all this.
Well,
I think the point, though, is well taken, that critiquing Israeli policy is not being anti-Semitic. I mean, that's the bottom line, and people see through that line of attack. Anya, it's so great to have you. Thank you so much
Crystal,
for being here.
Thank you, Anya. Appreciate it.
Coming up, Team Rising looks at the latest polling data and why Michael Bloomberg has been rising in the polls. That is next.